And now I get to introduce you to a guest from the Muslim community who has offered to share a blessing with us tonight. This is Dr. Ahmed Sobal, who is a leader in the local Islamic community and has been a leader for a great many years. Many of you may know him well. He presently serves as chair of the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California, which is an umbrella organization of 70 Islamic centers and organizations. We're gathered here tonight as mostly Christians to do the work that Christians need to do in relation to the Palestinian people. Dr. Sobal represents a brother of another faith tradition that's deeply grounded in the same land. And he's here to share the spiritual presence from his tradition in order to provide us with a sense of presence with all the peoples of this land.
Correction, my name is Abdullah. Just kidding. She got my name right. A greeting of peace. On behalf of the 700,000 Muslims live in Southern California, the 120 mosques, 50 plus Islamic organizations, I'm here to extend and share with you the message from my community that we are all for peace. We are all for justice. We're all for giving dignity, humanity to every single person on this earth, regardless of their faith, ethnicity, religion, or background. For the last 10 months have been very difficult, as you all know, not only for the people of Gaza, but for everyone who stood up against injustice, including you. The last 10 months have been difficult for us to see the atrocities. And then, more than that, whenever we speak against injustice, we are labeled as bad people. We are deprived from our freedom of speech rights. We've seen professors being fired, students suspended, politicians losing their positions simply because they spoke against injustice, simply because they are saying enough, not with our tax dollars, not with our power as a country. We cannot support such injustice. I'd like to thank you that you're all here to listen to one of the amazing global heroes. Reverend Munther Isaac is my fellow from my hometown, Bethlehem. And I'm proudly to share this with him. And also what we're doing tonight is we are extending a message to everyone who says that the interfaith work is not beneficial. I'm sure you've heard that. You've heard that people saying, oh, you interfaith people get together and just sing Kumbaya. No, we're not doing that. We're here to loudly send a message and understand what's happening to our brothers and sisters on the other side of the world. So with that said, we will put our hands together and we'll pray and we say, O God Almighty, we ask you to guide us among those whom you've guided. We ask you to protect us among those whom you've protected. We ask you to bless us among those whom you've blessed. We ask you to give us the wisdom, the courage, and the strength to say the truth and to stand up against injustice. We ask you in this night, our prayers are answered, and our brothers and sisters in humanity in Gaza are saved. We ask you to protect them from all kinds of harm. We ask you to feed them when they're hungry, to cure them when they're sick, and to heal them when they're wounded. We ask you to take care of their orphans, to take care of their widows. We ask you to take care of their elderly and their young. We ask you to give them shelter, health, security, and food. We ask you to bring peace and justice to them and to everyone else in this world. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I said that we have hard work to do, and we do. No one better could help us do that work than our presenter for tonight, Dr. Munther Isaac. Reverend Dr. Isaac is a Palestinian Christian, and he's a theologian who serves the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem and the Lutheran Church of Beit Sahour. He is also academic dean of Bethlehem Bible College and the director of the highly influential Christ at the Checkpoint conferences. Reverend Isaac is well known around the world. He's well known for his sermon, Christ Under the Rubble, which South Africans discovered and used in their plea to the United Nations to break the apartheid and genocide that is going on in Gaza. He's also well known as a speaker and for his interviews on media around the world. And he's known for his books. Two of his books that are widely read are The Other Side of the Wall and From Land to Lands, From Eden to the Renewed Earth. So now, Munther, we cannot wait to hear what you have to say. But we know that we will not be very comfortable after we hear you. Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me? So first I would like to begin by thanking Friends of Sabil for their hard work in putting this tour together, and I'm very grateful to be here in Claremont. Special thanks to the Claremont Presbyterian Church, and before that to the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church as well, for opening your spaces for me and my family to come and share our stories. Really, I'm very grateful for all of those who put this tour and this event together. At the same time, I'm not happy I'm here. I wish I was here in different circumstances. I'm really broken that 10 months after this war has broken, we're still calling for a ceasefire. Broken given that this is a genocide that is happening in front of the whole world to see, and we're still advocating for it to end. I remember the first time I traveled to the United States was actually in November, specifically to ask for a ceasefire before Christmas. We held meetings at DC, and we thought if only we could celebrate Christmas with this war having ended. And then after Christmas, friends of mine from, I think, Churches for Middle East approached and said, can we prepare a Lent series for Gaza? And I thought, surely the war would be over by March. And here we are in August, and this war is still happening. It's heartbreaking to continue to call for a ceasefire. It's heartbreaking because we feel we're calling for people to humanize the Palestinians. A genocide has been normalized, a type of genocide in which both those committing it and the victims are broadcasting live images. You can't claim you did not know. And we as Palestinians are asking, what would it take for this war? How many more images do you need to see? How many more people killed before the world decides enough is enough? How many more children need to be pulled from under the rubble until a ceasefire is achieved? Before we see the children of Gaza as humans. And sadly, and as I look at the madness of politicians, right now, it seems that we are far from the end. But despite all of that, and really it seems to me that we just got used to breaking news on our phone, 100 people killed in a strike, 20 killed in a strike. Despite all of that, we cannot stop talking about Gaza. We should not and we cannot. Otherwise, we accept the triumphant of evil. Otherwise, we accept that it's okay for people to be killed in such a horrific manner. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I will continue to call and plead for people to wake up. And I'm here precisely to address the American church and the American people in general. And to begin with, how many times do we need to tell you that this war did not start on October 7th? It's due time we address the root causes of this tragedy. Particularly, not just what happened in 1948, the Nakba. You know, a friend of mine says this war began with the phrase, a land without people. This is when we were erased as Palestinians. When they looked at our land and saw a land without people, a typical colonial mindset. Do I need to remind you that Israel is a settler colonial state? I hope I'm not saying something controversial here. This is how Israel started. With the expulsion of 800,000 Palestinians. 800,000. Israel was not created on an empty land, friends. This kind of myth that Israel was created on an empty land. And I find it really shocking, and I can't fathom how, when the Western media reports this war, they fail to mention that 80% of the people of Gaza are actually Nakba survivors from 1948, displaced in 1948 and now displaced again. And we ask, what would it take for the world to recognize the indigenous people of Palestine as humans, deserving of living in dignity in their own homeland? This war did not start on October 7th. It's been 76 years of oppression, displacement, and brutal occupation, and more than that, a system of apartheid. And we continue to ask, why is this ignored? Why isn't the church talking about apartheid in Palestine? It's something that really baffles me. The same church that claims to care about human rights and the international law, yet when numerous human rights organizations, one after the other, international, Palestinian, Israeli, say it is apartheid, it's systematic discrimination against the Palestinians, the church is silent. You know what they tell us? It's not helpful to use this language. They're more concerned about the language, whether it's helpful or building bridging, than the actual suffering of Palestinians. And you know what's really interesting about the apartheid discussion is that the Israeli human rights organization Beit Sahour, when they made their report about apartheid in Palestine, you know what the title was? A system of Jewish supremacy from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea. You know, this phrase that became so controversial in the United States. I wish people were more concerned about the injustice and the system of discrimination from the river to the sea, as Beit Sahour describes it. So why are we talking about the context? Why aren't we talking about the real issue that led us to this moment? The whole world stopped with the kidnapping of Israeli children. And I hope we all agree that kidnapping children is wrong and evil. And I hope that we all agree that that shouldn't happen. Yet why isn't anybody talking about the 9,000 Palestinians kidnapped after October 7th? 9,000. No one's talking about them. Kidnapped, tortured, raped, starved. No one talks about them. You know why? Because the powerful labels them as terrorists. And then they are arrested in the middle of the night. No trial, no charges. They don't see a lawyer. And I haven't seen a country pose the Palestinian flag on its monument. I haven't seen countries waging war on Israel to release these hostages. But this shows you the power of terminology. And we as Palestinians then ask, what would it take for the world to see us. Are we less humans that you don't care about our children being kidnapped? Do you know that on an annual year, hundreds of Palestinian children are arrested and in prison? Hundreds. Why isn't people talking about that? And then you begin to ask, why are Palestinians angry and frustrated? For 10 months, we continued to hear about Israel's sacred right to defend itself, and we ask ourselves, do we have the right to defend ourselves? When it was our land that was stolen, our narrative that was stolen, when we were expelled from our land, do we have that right? By the way, I'm for creative, nonviolent resistance. I don't believe in violence. But I'm shocked that people continue to talk about one people's right to defend themselves, and no one mentions Palestinians' right to defend themselves. And you know, when Palestinians defend themselves, they're terrorists. But when Israel commits violence, it's a democracy. What would it take for us to talk about state terrorism? So I'm keen here to shake these concepts and terms that we're used to. We're appalled by the double standards. It's not just that the context is ignored, but even in this war of genocide, it revealed a shocking amount of hypocrisy and double standards. It was all manifested in an revealing way in, I think, January of this year, when the ruling of the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, were made public. And they found that it is very plausible that Israel is committing genocide and that Israel must ensure that it changes practices on the ground. A well-documented report. We've all watched what happened on TV. I think in American TVs, no one shows the South African case, but if you looked, you would see it. Well-presented case that Israel is committing genocide. How did the United States respond? They call it baseless, meritless. They didn't do a thing. The whole world didn't do one thing. And then within a day or two from the ruling of the ICJ, believe me, within a day or two, Israel alleged only alleged that 12 UNRWA members participated in the October 7th attack, and the whole European countries and the United States and UK stopped funding to UNRWA. I mean, the amount of hypocrisy is appalling, and the level of racism behind this hypocrisy is even more appalling. But I've also here come to say that I hope you understand that the American church is complicit in all that is happening. You're not bystanders. Theology has played a role for 76 years. Even before that, as I said, as my Palestinian friend, theologian Yusuf Khoury said, this genocide started with the phrase, a land without people. This is when we were erased. And then for years, we had to hear in theology books, in churches, in pulpits, how Jews have returned to their land, putting us, the indigenous Palestinians, as strangers in our own land by simply claiming they returned, as if we have been occupying someone else's land. For 76 years, colonialism needed a theology. And I keep asking now, for those who use the Bible to support Israel's right to possess and live in our, to exist in our land using the Bible, I say, are you really listening to yourselves? Imposing your own religious beliefs on us? Telling us, imagine if I am in an argument, and when we're arguing about something, if my part of the story is, well, God said so, how can I discuss? How can I say? What can I say? Really, it's the end of the conversation. But this is what the Western world has imposed on millions of Palestinians. God gave the land to the Jews. And then I ask myself, are you listening to yourselves? This is a political dispute. And your side of the story is, well, God said something. I mean, would you do this same thing in any other context where a political dispute is solved by the concept, well, God gave the land to certain people? Or we go to a certain religious text, see to whom did God give the land 4,000 years ago? Who are the descendants of these people? They take the land. It's ridiculous. Yet this is what you are trying to impose on us. And us, are you listening to yourselves? And oh, by the way, imagine if Muslims did it. Imagine if Muslims says, well, Allah gave us the land and you Jews leave this country. They will be called anti-Semite, fundamentalist. But somehow this is what Christians have been telling us as the norm. And then people say, well, doesn't the Bible say this? And again I ask, are you listening to yourselves? Because if your side of the story is is that the Bible teaches about a tribal God of violence, sorry to say very clearly, a racist God, I have a problem with that theology. And then you want me to go and debate exegesis and let's study Genesis and Romans and Galatians. No, let's study what you're saying. You're telling me that God is a God of supremacy, that God has a certain plan for a certain people that trumps the desires and needs and justice of other nations. I can't accept that. Let's call things for what they are. Christian Zionism, in essence, teaches about a racist, violent God. Friends, a colonial God. A God who approves the ethnic cleansing of 800,000 Palestinians. And it shocks me that we want to use the Bible to justify that. And maybe I shouldn't be shocked. Hasn't the Bible used to justify segregation? Wasn't the Bible used to justify slavery? And in South Africa, apartheid. And as hard as it is for me, I was in South Africa. I learned from my South African friends. I listened at their faith. I shared they shared their experience. And I would go to places and they would tell me, this is the pulpit from which the first apartheid sermon was preached. And this is the pulpit from which, this is the seminary where theologians created apartheid theology. And I ask myself, how does anybody read the Bible and conclude apartheid? I can't get it. And in the same way, we Palestinians are asking today, how does anybody read the Bible, the one in which we learn about Jesus, who came to us in full compassion and mercy and love, and then you conclude a tribal racist God who wages wars? We can't get it. We can't get it. And maybe the answer is, in the saying that in the beginning, God created man in his own image, and since then we've been returning the favor. This is how we reflect our own prejudice and supremacy on the nature of God. And it's time we repent from this. And by the way, when I say theology aided colonialism, it's not just Christian Zionism, the theology of power, but there is so much in the so-called progressive liberal churches that also justified and supported this war. Churches were silent, let's face it. The same churches that boasted about justice and civil rights and equality, many were silent. And so if Christian Zionism teaches about a racist God, many in the mainline liberal churches promoted the idea of a God who does not care. A God who does not care. We were told this is a just war. I've read many arguments that this is a just war, using the just war theory. Israel has the sacred duty to defend itself. And today we say, how is the killing of 16,000 children self-defense? But not only that, when you say this is a just war, what you're basically saying is that the killing of 16,000 children is the justice of God. Imagine that. A God who does not care. And I've learned how serious is the sin of apathy in many of our religious circles. We fight over dogma, we fight over religious beliefs, yet have so much little compassion, so much apathy. I think of the parable, and I've learned this recently, studying the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Many of you from the Christian tradition know this passage. And for years I wondered, what's the sin of the rich man? Is being rich a sin? Until I realized that the passage says, Lazarus lied at his gate, at the gate of the rich man. In other words, this rich man saw Lazarus every day going in and going out and did nothing. It's the sin of apathy. The sin of apathy. And this is my fear. Given that, again, this is a war that's being broadcast live in front of all to see, and we're still not able to reach a point to say enough is enough. That's why I will continue to say silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. When we do nothing, when we say nothing in the wake of injustice, we take the side of the oppressor. And when as people of faith we say nothing in the face of injustice and oppression, we communicate and say that God does not care about this oppression and injustice. That's why I'm saying silence is complicity. And you know what's hard to accept? What's hard to accept is the fact that for so many churches, they chose silence because it's comfortable. They want to avoid controversy. They don't want to get into trouble. You know how many churches actually wouldn't host such an event because of the controversy that might come. Imagine if Jesus walked on earth avoiding controversy, by the way. But it's sad when we care about avoiding controversy more than we care about justice and about children dying. It's really sad. This is a wake-up call. And so my message to the church third, is that this is a Kairos moment. Friend, this is a Kairos moment, a moment that I call you are the man moment. What I mean is I would like to use a passage from the Hebrew scripture from 1 Samuel 12. When I talk about a Kairos moment, it is the time to act. It's an opportune time. It is the time in which the faithful need to have discernment about unfolding drama and then act courageously and prophetically. The passage I'm referring to is in 1 Samuel 12. It happened when the prophet Nathan had to confront King David about David's sin of greed, adultery, murder, exploiting the vulnerable, and taking what is not his own. David did all of these. How did Nathan respond? He confronted him. He gave a story with a clear message and then a strong conclusion. I'm going to read the story. And the Lord sent Nathan to David. He came to him and said to him, there were two men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little lamb that he had bought. This poor man has brought it up, grew it up with him and his children. It used to eat of his meager fare and drink from the cup and lie in his bosom. And it was like a daughter to him. This is how much he cared for that lamb. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was loath to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the wayfarer who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared that for the guest who had come to him. It's a shocking story, and the Bible says that David was angry and greatly kindled against that man. He was furious. He said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. He shall restore the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing and because he had no pity. And then came Nathan's response, and this is my point of the story. Nathan's response was so profound, so courageous, so prophetic, a response that is so much needed in our world today. Nathan said to David, you are the man. You are the man. This was Nathan's challenge to the empire of his time, and it took courage. But he had to speak truth to power, and he had to speak truth to his own empire. He had to uncover the exploitation of the vulnerable, even if it meant challenging his own king. This was Nathan's Kairos moment. And what is happening in Gaza and Palestine today is a Kairos moment to the church, which demands a similar prophetic courage. This is a you are the man moment. We need to speak truth to power. Friend, this is not time for diplomacy. Nathan was smart and wise, but he was not diplomatic. He spoke truth to power. He did not try to rationalize the position of David. You know, David was lonely, he had to do this thing. He didn't do any of that. He did not say, well, the rich person had his point of view why he had to kill the poor person. He didn't do any of that. You know, the kind of stuff that has been imposed on us. Where is the other side of the story? Why don't you speak the message of peace? This is not the time for this. This is not the time for shallow diplomacy. This is a Kairos moment that demands courage, integrity, clarity, and morality. And I say this precisely to political leaders and to faith leaders. And I say it with a broken heart. You know why? Because I have many conversations, not just the last 10 months, but over the years with faith leaders and political leaders. And you know what's so hard? Is that behind closed doors, they tell you one thing, and in public, they say one thing. They say, we agree with you, we understand. And you know what some of whom have told me? We wish we could say this in public. And by the way, they can say this in public, but they chose not to. And this is the point. They lack the courage. They lack the integrity. This is why I keep saying, this is a different moment right now. It's a different moment in which the church needs to confess its complexity, especially the American church. Repent and reverse course and make amends. The urgency is so high. We can't afford the old ways. We can't afford the prayers and wishes. We can't afford the middle ground. The children of Gaza certainly can't afford that. Repentance means calling things by name, and I hope that this begins a new era for the church. Speaking truth to power means calling things by name the way Nathan did. Nathan's response was not making a vague statement that said nothing, that tried to please both sides of the story. My goodness, the church is so good at making statements. Statements that say nothing, by the way. Calling things by name means that this is not a moment to preach on us peace and reconciliation as Palestinians. What we need is the end of apartheid, the end of oppression. Calling things by name begins by recognizing Zionism for what Zionism truly is. Zionism is racism and supremacy. Let's call it for what it is. Zionism has produced the ethnic cleansing of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and more. Zionism has constituted a system of apartheid. And today, I would argue Zionism is involved in a genocide. And for those Christians who say they are Christian Zionists, I ask, can you put the word Christian before colonialism, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing? And for that matter, many Jewish leaders would say, we can't even put the word Jewish before all of that. I love the direct statement of Jewish Voice for Peace. And this is directly from their statement. Jewish Voice for Peace is guided by a vision of justice, equality, and freedom for all people. Therefore, we unequivocally oppose Zionism because it is counter to those ideals. Straightforward, to the point. I wish more Christians had this courage to call Zionism for what it truly is. They recognize you can't be for equality and freedom and justice and then support Zionism. You can't. You simply can't. It's time we call Zionism for what it truly is. And friends, it's time to stop talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. There is no conflict in Palestine. A conflict gives the impression there are two entities fighting. It's time we call things by their name. There is colonialism in Palestine. There is apartheid. There is oppression. It is so offensive when someone is literally under the boot of the other is putting his neck under the boot, and you're preaching about a conflict and peace. It's time to realize the reality for what it is and to call things by name. And for that, my message is that faith leaders in the United States need to come together, need to form new alliances. We can't continue to work each part alone. No, we need to work together. So far, one of the most uplifting elements of this tour was seeing Jews and Muslims and Christians coming together for justice. I truly believe this is the beginning of something special, in which we show the way forward. Not the kind of interreligious dialogue where we sing kumbaya or get to know one another, but in which we work together for justice. Show what the kingdom of God is truly about. I'm very encouraged to see the beginning of many of these initiatives in different contexts. But my message to faith leaders is simple. Israel has been doing what it's doing for the last 76 years for precisely two reasons. One, they know they are never held accountable. And two, they are not paying for it. And if faith leaders are not willing to step in and say, we cannot accept this, then who will? Israel knows that it can commit war crimes, break the international law, and no one will hold them accountable. We try sanction, there is an American veto. And if faith leaders are not willing to say enough is enough, we are not okay with apartheid, then who will? If faith leaders are not willing to take a courageous step to stop the breaking of international law and committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, then who will? And if faith leaders are not the ones who demand that money is spent in a responsible way for justice, then who will? Friends, it's your tax money. That's another reason why you can't be silent. You need to hold your government accountable for how they spent your money. And again, if it's faith leaders who are not leading this moral discussion, then who will? It's time that you come together and form new alliances and hold those who commit war crimes accountable. I say this too well, that just a week or two ago, Netanyahu was in the Congress, celebrated as a hero. I'm grateful for the 100 or so congressmen and women who boycotted that event. But nevertheless, where was the faith leaders to say, this is not acceptable? Why didn't we come together to say, this is not acceptable? Demand answer, demand change, demand accountability, and lead. Lead when a time in which this country needs moral and ethical leadership. Let me conclude. In December, I declared Gaza has become the moral compass of our world. Gaza has divided our world, and actually that's a good thing, because we need to know where you stand. We need to know where you stand from the killing of 16,000 children. Gaza has become the moral compass, and it divided our world not on the basis of religion or ethnicity or nationality, but on ethical grounds. We need to know where you stand. Are you on the side of justice or on the side of apartheid? It's that simple. There is no middle ground. We need to know where you stand. We need to step up because it's our collective humanity that is at stake. For if the world is okay with what's happening in Gaza, being broadcast live, and we're still watching, something is wrong with our humanity. A genocide has been normalized. We cannot accept the triumphant of evil. We cannot accept the triumphant of the murder of children. We cannot allow this to happen under our watch. We have to take a stand. And for my Christian sisters and brothers, my Christian siblings, it's also the credibility of our Christian witness that is at stake, and I'm convinced of that. For if we are silent when 16,000 children have been massacred, something is wrong with our witness. Especially given that the Bible has been weaponized to justify this very particular genocide. So we cannot be silent. It's not a choice. Yes, I am convinced it's the credibility of our Christian witness. And it's been so hard over the last 10 months to witness so many people traumatized by the church. I'm broken by it. I love the church. But to see so many young people delusional and I can't tell you how many people told me, Pastor, we stopped going to church after Gaza. So many people told me that. I'm talking hundreds. Where was the church? It's not as if we didn't speak about justice. We didn't comfort people. Where was the church? It's an important question that I've learned myself in a difficult way in the past. You know, when horrible things happen, we're always oriented to asking ourselves, where was God? Right? But I think many times the right question is not where was God? Where were the good people to stop this evil? In my case, as a Christian pastor, I have to ask, where was the church? I remember the first time I asked this question in a difficult manner was when I visited the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. And by the way, I'm not comparing suffering or context. I'm just telling you the story. Accompanied by an Israeli friend who told me the story, and I've seen the museum, and I was shocked. I was horrified. It's traumatizing. It's hard. And I remember the whole time in my naivety, in my early 20s, the question I kept asking the whole time, do you know what? Where was the church? I didn't ask where was God. I asked where was the church. What did Christian leaders in Germany do? I was naive, to be honest. And of course, I studied later history and realized they were complicit. They were part of this. Where was the church? Where is the church is the question we need to ask, especially if we worship Jesus, God incarnate, the one who was compassion embodiment on earth, the walking, loving, caring, compassionate Jesus. Yet we're silent about this. Where was the church is the question. Where is the church in the streets? And I believe the church must find its home in the streets. It's the way of Jesus. I look at those demonstrating all over the world, the students and many others, especially those from Palestinian descent. They are broken. And what is the response of many? Accuse them of anti-Semitism, rather than showing compassion, rather than showing care. Where was the church? It's a troubling question to me. And dare I remind you that God takes these things seriously. One of the passages that have accompanied me, encouraged me, empowered me in the last 10 months was the story Jesus told about Judgment Day in Matthew 25. We don't like to talk about judgment, Christians, right? Let's face it. And Jesus claimed in Matthew 25 that God will judge us based on how we treated the least of these. This is the basis on which God will judge humanity. How we treat the least of, who are the least of these? I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me water. I was naked and you gave me clothes. I was a prisoner and you visited me. And I was a stranger and you gave me. It's how we treated those marginalized and oppressed. This is the basis on which God will judge humanity. Are we taking this passage seriously? Are we taking Jesus' call seriously? And it's not only that, it's whether we see the image of Jesus in each one of those. Whatever you have done to the least of these, you have done, Jesus said, to me. Are we taking Jesus seriously when he says these things? And it's precisely this concept that was behind the idea of Jesus under the rubble. Because we see Jesus' image in every child pulled from under the rubble in a time when the world continues 10 months later to justify and rationalize the killing of children in Gaza. And we say no, we see the image of Jesus in them. This is why I said Jesus is under the rubble, because this is the concept of the incarnation, God becoming one of us precisely in our times of trouble. This is Emmanuel, God with us in our pain. Jesus was born among the occupied, not among the empire. This is how God's love was manifested. Jesus is under the rubble as God's solidarity with the marginalized, with the oppressed, with the victims of wars. And if this is God's solidarity, then God's solidarity must become our solidarity. God's solidarity must become our solidarity. This is why it is time for the church to rise. So with one voice, let us say, ceasefire now. And may justice reign and righteousness fill the world like water fill the oceans. Thank you.
Salam alaikum. I learned it from him. What do you find is the best way to get youth aware of the genocide in Gaza, as well as the ongoing suppression and oppression of Palestinian people? And parallel question, how do you support and encourage and empower university students? What's the best way to develop awareness among youth about the genocide in Gaza?
The youth, can you hear me? Yeah, the youth get it. It's the politicians who we have a problem with. Social media has helped. Palestinians are risking everything, by the way, even the ones in Gaza. They're risking everything for the world to know. And there is a lot of response with those messages. So I think many are getting it, many are beginning to get it. And one thing about university students, when they demonstrate, they tend to always be on the right side of history. And I mean, you know, in a strange way, we have found morality right now and integrity among the students in those demonstrations. And how were they met? They were met with force. And I think the reason they were met with force is those committing these things is that they realize that this is the beginning of the end. To me, what will happen in September, and I've been saying this, with the when universities resume, is far more important than what will happen in November. You know, we think that the next president is gonna, and by the way, I'm praying for you in November. God help you. But the real change will happen, I hope, in September with those, will those students be resilient and inspired by the resilience of the Palestinians and go back to these demonstrations. This is where I have hope, actually. And this is where I hope that faith leaders join them, support them, encourage them, lead them as well when there is need, so that it's not as if they are the ones and they don't get it. No, faith leaders need to speak as well with those students.
This is a theological question. How can one believe in a God that allows what is happening to the Palestinians?
We have to stop blaming God and look at the mirror. It's humanity that's doing this. God has shown us the way. God has shown us what needs to happen and what we need to do. It's us who choose this path. So rather than continuing to blame God, I mean, if this was an earthquake, I'll understand the question. I'll accept it and I'll say it's a difficult question. I have no answers. But in the case of a genocide, how can we blame God when He has shown us the way, He has told us what needs to happen, how to act? And in the case of, you know, I'm a Christian, I feel not only did God send us instructions on paper what to do, He embodied those instructions in the person of Jesus. So we know what, you know, we have an example in the pages of Scripture of what to do, and then we blame God. No, it's our fault.
Thank you. This one's a little bit broader here. I realize we just were referred to UNRWA. And then What are other organizations that you want to recommend to us to help people in Gaza right now?
Well, first, a word about UNRWA. I think it's important to support UNRWA, at least to make a political statement to your government that if you stop funding them, we will fund them. This is important because Israel right now is leading a very fierce campaign to delegitimize UNRWA and in process to get away from their historical responsibility towards the Palestinian refugees. And they have, made so many allegations unproven, and the people need to speak that we are not with this decision to defund or to delegitimize UNRWA. There are numerous human rights organizations, and it depends. I mean, we can't limit them to one or two. I generally don't like to, but there are many, and there are many Christian, Muslim, Jewish, secular. Everybody's now. The problem is, will we be able to enable aid to get into Gaza? There's a question that is being circulated, who's going to fund the rebuilding of Gaza? And I'm asking, are we sure Israel will allow concrete to enter Gaza? We're not Israel is not, we're not forcing Israel to let water, medicine enter Gaza. And then we talk about, so we need to put every pressure possible on Israel to finally, let go of this control over the border and allow aid and medicine and everything needed to enter into Gaza. So let's focus on that and not just talk about, because right now, I know of many who raised funds, but they don't know what to do with them, honestly. It's important. We need those funds. We need this money, especially the day after the war ends. But if we go back to October 6th, when the war is over, then we're back to the same point.
Thank you. Now, this question comes from someone who is already an activist for Palestinian people. And the question is, in your opinion, how does one engage, or should a person engage with those who have this religious view, that is to say, Zionism or Christian Zionism?
How do we engage with Christian Zionists? I've tried several things. And by the way, many changed. I'm not saying it's hopeless. But I think one thing that I think is now helpful is to help Christian Zionists understand what they're really saying, because I don't think they are. And it's different from one Christian Zionist to the other. I think we also need to expose the anti-Semitism in many of those Christian Zionists. This is a serious issue. Many Christian Zionists who are obsessed with bringing Jews to Palestine only dream that 2/3 of those Jews will be massacred and the other third will convert to Christianity. Now, they might not say these words. They will say there will be a global war, Armageddon, and then Israel will embrace the Messiah. But in essence, what they're saying is Jews are good only to be massacred and convert to Christianity. And somehow they are called friends of Israel. So we need to expose this. We need to expose this. And second, as I said, we need to help them understand what they're saying. Because I sit with well-intentional evangelicals and I ask them, do you really understand what you're saying? This is a question I ask. Not only about imposing a theological belief in a political discourse, but really contributing to historical injustice towards another group of people. Are you okay with this? And I think we need to make those Christian Zionists to rethink the consequences of their theologies and beliefs, beginning with the point that the land is not empty, and rejecting their common response of dehumanizing Palestinians. Now, some would say we need to do theology and open the Bible and study it together. And believe me, I've done this for years. My PhD was in biblical studies. I have a whole book on how to read the theology of the land. But I found it very hard, very painful, that we have to open the Bible to study certain texts in order for an American Christian to recognize that ethnic cleansing is wrong and to stop blaming us for it. So we really need to help them understand what's happening on the ground, what the theology led to, what their beliefs led to, and then ask really, do you still want to, is this what we want to debate?
Thank you. I just want to expand on that last question. Can you think of some examples back in Palestine of Christians, Muslims, and Jews collaborating with one another for justice?
Well, when it comes to Christians and Muslims in Palestine, and Palestinians are Christians and Muslims, and we have some Samaritans in Nablus, we don't collaborate because we're one. You don't collaborate with yourself. So in Palestine, people ask, what kind of interfaith happens in Palestine? You don't have a dialogue with yourself. We're really one neighborhood, one people, going through the same injustice, facing the occupation together. So when we face the occupation, we face it as one people. With regards to with Jewish voices, there are many Jewish activists today, an increasing number, yet sadly the predominantly strong voice in Israel is that of the right and the extreme right. The political map right now and the geographical map in Palestine is as such that prevents us from actually meeting physically. I can't go to Jerusalem. I can't go to the Israeli cities. They can't come to me unless they want to break the law. So there isn't enough, I would say, joint interfaith initiatives happening right now. And the political discourse is not allowing us to meet in such a manner. I think right now it's so hard to speak even as an Israeli Jew against the occupation, especially after October 7th. Israel has put on laws against speaking, for example, and they've arrested people just for speaking. So right now there is a sense of fear that is controlling the space in what is known as Israel, which is ironic given that Israel is celebrated as the only democracy in the Middle East, but, By the way, sorry, you know how insulting and offensive it is to us Palestinians when you say the statement, the only democracy in the Middle East? Israel is an apartheid state. I hope you understand this. You come across either as too ignorant, sorry to say, or too racist to care for what Israel is doing to Palestinians. So next time you think Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, study the reports. Study the facts before you say it.
We'd like to hear you discuss some creative nonviolence. There's a lot of people in the U.S. who fear Trump and his movement and are willing to ignore the genocide, consequently vote for Kamala Harris. And just wondering, what are some creative nonviolent moves that you would commend to Americans here?
So Palestinians tried nonviolence, by the way. Even the people of Gaza tried nonviolence. Again, one of the things that is not reported in this war. Did you know that, I think 4 years ago, for a whole year, every week, the people of Gaza demonstrated in what is known as the March of Return or March of Freedom and were killed? They demonstrated non-violently in the response. So, I need to understand that Palestinians believe and practice non-violence. The world did not support them. The world failed them and continue to fail them. But when it comes to what can be done as a creative, and I think, honestly, the most effective one right now is what the Palestinian civil society said and made a call in 2005 for boycotting divesting and sanctioning Israel, boycotting from goods, divestment and sanctions. I don't see any other way. And again, when I see, for example, and I think it's happened in many other states, but because I was in Pennsylvania, and no, I wasn't, but when states in the United States pass laws that criminalize BDS or make receiving funds from the state conditional to signing that you will not support BDS, this tells you what's happening in your country. And I'm shocked that you're silent. They are attacking your freedom to choose what to buy and what not to buy. And you're okay with it? And I think it shows how serious and how afraid they are from this movement. At the end of the day, I think that the only thing that will make Israel come to the table and decide, are they going to give us some land for our own state, or are they going to make us equal citizens in their state and have one state? They have to decide. And the only way for them to sit on the table and be forced to make that decision is if they are forced to by the international community, if they are sanctioned, if they are isolated. I think this is a way in which the whole humanity can come together and say, we will not accept apartheid to be part of our international community today. It's creative, it's non-violent, it brings people from different faiths, and I hope we take it seriously. And the question is, will we continue to allow the empire to dictate what we do with our own money, given that they take your money and invest it in apartheid, and now they even want to control what you buy and what not to buy. So you have to say something about it. You have to say something about it in the United States.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, becoming a wise consumer is pretty important. And I don't know if my daughter's watching this online, but she's had a lot of good social effect on my shopping and so forth, and no doubt many of you as well. So, this is such a great question. I feel like I want to sit down and talk with you about it instead of having and let everybody else in. What do you think for us would be good sources of media with which to be informed about Palestine?
A good source of media. Wow. I'll be very biased because, you know, I have my favorite. I really think Al Jazeera is doing a great job, Al Jazeera English. And I hope I'm not promoting, you know. I think Mahdi Hassan started his own channel. Zeteo is amazing. Is it Democracy Now? Democracy Now.
Democracy Now.
Zeteo and Democracy Now.
Zeteo News.
Yes. Amy Goodman. I've been on her show twice, so I've been with Amy twice. Amy Goodman for sure. But I would also highlight, and we cannot undermine what the Palestinians themselves on the social media are doing. And it's not comfortable, it's risky. So we need to follow those accounts of Palestinians, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank, who are sharing the truth of what is happening. Middle East Eye is another one that I like.
The next question is asking specifically, what do you want us to do tonight or tomorrow? You're looking up social media accounts for us.
Tonight or tomorrow? Well, tonight say a prayer. Prayer works. Prayer is important. I believe in prayer. It's hard, it's a test to our faith. Why does, going back to the first question, why does God allow this? Yes, I blame humanity, but nevertheless, we must continue to plead with God. We must continue to pray. We can't lose faith. So I would say a prayer. And then tomorrow, I think many times we have the impression that we can change everything at once. And that if we do this one thing, the world would change. Let me use something from my Christian tradition. Jesus said that the kingdom of God is as like a small mustard seed. You plant it and then mysteriously it grows into a big tree. Why am I saying this? Because every little effort helps. Every small thing you do helps. It could be calling someone in Gaza that you know to encourage them. It could be calling your friend who you think needs to know and to change his position, giving his influence. It could be writing your representatives. It could be reaching out to a ministry in Palestine or to friends in Palestine and giving generously to them. What I want to say is that don't think we can solve this tomorrow morning. But remember that every small effort helps. And let's build on these small efforts, one small effort at a time. In one of the places I visited, as I said, it was really refreshing to see small initiatives in the basement of a mosque in Pittsburgh. Christian, Muslims, and Jews coming together, strategizing. How do we reach the next community? How do we reach the next political leader? How do we empower this? How do we raise funds for this congresswoman who's speaking for Palestine? So it's these small things that we think don't make a difference, whereas in reality, they do make all the difference. And finally, I think it's important to ask the question strategically, how do we link with others who are doing the same work? I feel many times everyone is doing something here and there, whereas at the same time, a lot can be done jointly. On a state level, maybe on a city level, and it's important that Christians don't work alone, or Muslims don't work alone, or Jews don't work alone. This is the time in which, as I said, we're seeing really amazing voices from these communities. When they come together, they're even stronger. So let's think, how can we connect these voices together? But remember, it's not a marathon, it's small little initiatives, one small little thing you do at a time. And say a prayer tonight.
Thank you. In a related note, and this is directed towards our Christian community here, how do we be Nathan to our church leaders? How do we help our faith leaders find their voice? How do we bring our Christian value? Oh, okay, well, we'll hold on that question. Yeah, let's start with that first one. How do we begin to speak the truth to our pastors to help them find their voice?
You send an email and say, can I meet with you? And then do it. Are they listening? Are they hearing from the people? Are the bishops and archbishops, and are they really hearing from us? Unfortunately, many have withdrawn, and I understand the pain and frustration, but withdrawal cannot be the answer. And we can be creative. We can hold signs in the middle of the church. Why aren't you speaking? We can send letters to our religious leaders. They too sometimes need to be reminded of the role they need to play. So yeah, it's as simple as I said, sending an email and asking, can I have a meeting? I would like to talk about Gaza. Why aren't you talking about Gaza? What more can we do about Gaza? And let's amplify the Christian voices that exist in Palestine, because they help, especially when it comes to reaching Christian leaders in the United States. So it could be as simple as, have you read this book? Have you heard this? So this mobilization needs to happen. And let me repeat what I said these are different times, by the way. Friends, these are different times. These are urgent times. The ways of the past don't work. It's not enough anymore to say I'm frustrated from my pastor or from my priest. It's not enough. You have to do something about it. You have to demand. you have to demand, where do you stand? They have to listen to us if we are serious about making a change and making a difference.
Got about 2 more questions here for you. So, in some ways, you've been gesturing towards this, but this is a good question. What future or what futures should we be working toward?
What future should we be working for? Let me be very honest. As a Palestinian, I have a problem with this question because right now, I can't think of the future. I don't know if I will have a future. Many times people ask me, what's your hope? And to be honest, I don't talk about hope anymore. I talk about survival. I hope to survive. I hope Gaza survives. I hope the West Bank survives. I hope the war does not escalate. I can't think beyond that. I can't think of a 1-state or a 2-state or these theoretical, honestly meaningless question to us right now when we are under assault, when our existence is under a threat. So before talking about the future, how do we stop this genocide? I think this is the question we should ask. And second, how do we dismantle the structure of apartheid that exists in Palestine? And only then I'm happy to have a conversation and explore the possibilities about the future. The reason I say is many times I feel this question seems to freeze us or cripple us as if, what future do we have? I don't care what future, and by the way, I've written about this. I've written that my hope is to share the land. I used very nice language. I want to live with Israelis as my neighbors. My book, The Other Side of the Wall, you read it. I want to live with Israelis as my neighbors, to share the land as equals, equal rights, equal responsibilities, no second-class citizens. It's beautiful. Right now, if you ask me, I don't even think of that. Are we going to survive this genocide? Will it escalate to the West Bank? On a personal level, will I be allowed to go back to Palestine? Honestly, we don't know. Everything we do right now is a risk. Everything we do has risks. There is danger all the time. So when people ask me about the future, I say, stop thinking of the future and think, how do we stop this genocide now and how do we dismantle apartheid? And then let's talk about the future afterwards.
Just wanted to say thank you for all of your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. And could you please give thanks again to Munther Isaac